Welcome to Hope One Live, ladies and gentlemen. What is the scientific way to show that God exists? That's what we're going to be talking about in just a few minutes. And then we're going to get to your questions live via Skype. If you want to be on the program live via Skype, here's how you can do it. The great Jorge Gill is going to show you. Jorge, how are they going to do it?
Frank, it's pretty simple. I'm just going to do a quick, we've done this long enough for people that know how to get this done. So it's going to be just a quick tutorial on how you guys can do it. It is pretty simple. Number one, what you have to do is you have to go to the website crossexamined.org/SQ, stands for Skype questions. And once you're there, you're going to be able to see this page. You can do it on your phone. You can do it on your laptop. Once you're on this form, what you have to do is number one, add your name and then your Skype ID. And when I say Skype ID, what I need you to do is put the ID the Skype assigned you. If you don't know it, use the email that you use to log in into Skype. Okay, make sure you add your name so we can call you by name. Add your Skype ID so we can actually find you on Skype and send you a message to invite you to the show. Choose whether you're a Christian, an atheist, an agnostic, or other. You hold on to a different belief system. And then give us a summary of your question. This is for us just to be able to pick the best questions. Once you are in there, once you see my message come through, just stand by. I'm going to give you a set of instructions. And then if you're using your laptop, if you can put on your headphones, that's great. Make sure that the light is not behind you, but in front of you. And make sure you're not moving your camera all over the place. If you're using a phone, make sure that you're able to sit your phone somewhere and you're using it on the vertical, on a horizontal way instead of having it vertical, because if you do that, it's hard for us to get you in. So make sure that you fill out this form, and then just wait for us to reach out to you. With that being said, Frank, back to you.
All right, great. Thanks, Jorge. And start calling in now or putting that information in now, because once we're done with this little segment about using the scientific method or the scientific way to show that God exists, we're going to go right to your questions. So
exactly,
put them in there now. You can also put them in the chat. We'll try and get to a few chat questions if you like.
And again, we try and give priority to super chats and stars, but you don't have to do it. I mean, we try to get to as many as we can, but since we have live interaction and chat interaction, sometimes some are not going to be picked.
All right, good. All right, let's talk about this now. When people ask me what's the easiest way to show that God exists, I say what we want to do is go to the foundation of science. The foundation of science is the law of causality. When you're doing science, what you're doing is you're trying to figure out what particular cause caused a particular effect. Now, it turns out that there are many aspects about reality, many effects that are best explained by a cause known as God. Now, some of you are going to say, wait, Frank, this is a God of the gaps argument. I'll get to that a little bit later. Hold on to that objection. But the way we know God exists now is by his effects. So if somebody says to you, how do you know God exists? You can say, well, I would say two things. Number one, God is the best explanation for why things are the way they are. And number two, the way we know that God exists is because we know him by his effects. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, for example, the universe is an effect. Even atheists are admitting the universe had a beginning, that space, time, and matter had a beginning out of nothing. Well, if that's really true, if space, time, and matter literally had a beginning out of nothing, and it's pretty uncontroversial today that that is indeed the case, then whatever created space, time, and matter can't be made of space, time, and matter. In other words, the cause must transcend space, time, and matter. The cause must be spaceless because space didn't exist prior to the creation. So whatever created space can't be made of space. The cause must be timeless because time didn't exist. So whatever created time has to be timeless. Also immaterial because there was no material. Material itself was created. So whatever created material must be immaterial. The cause must also be powerful, obviously, to create the universe out of nothing. The cause must be personal in order to make a choice. Now, why do you have to make a choice to create? Because impersonal forces don't make choices. For example, gravity, which is a created force, by the way, it didn't exist from eternity. Gravity doesn't decide whether it's going to pull something to the ground. Gravity just does it. There's no mind to it. It just does what it does. But to go from a state of nothingness to a state of creation, someone had to make a choice, and only persons can make choices. The being would also have to be intelligent in order to make a choice. In other words, the being would have to have a mind. Now, ladies and gentlemen, when you think about a spaceless, timeless, immaterial, powerful, personal, intelligent cause, who do you think of? Well, God. Now, some will say, well, Frank, how do you know it's the Christian God? And the answer is, we don't. Yet, we haven't done enough research yet. From this argument, which is known as the cosmological argument, that if the universe had a beginning, it must have had a beginner, and it seems like it had a beginner with these attributes, that just gets you to what looks like a theistic or maybe deistic God. But to know that this theistic God or deistic God actually is the God of the Bible, you've got to do research to see if Jesus rose from the dead. And if he indeed did rise from the dead, and of course I think he did, then whatever God teaches is true. And Jesus taught through his apostles that he was the creator of the universe. So the same being that walked out of the tomb 1,988 years ago is the same being in whose divine nature created the universe out of nothing. So the universe is in effect. Now, someone's going to say, oh, Frank, this is a God of the gaps argument. You just don't have a natural cause for this. So there's got to be a natural cause that we'll discover at some point. And this is God of the gaps. What is God of the gaps? God of the gaps is placing God into a gap of your knowledge. When you can't figure out the cause for something, you say, oh, God must have done it. And this is a valid objection in many cases, because a lot of times people would say, well, they'd plug God in, and later they'd figure out it wasn't God. Like, for example, thunder and lightning. The gods are mad at us. You know, they didn't realize there was natural cause for thunder and lightning. Okay, so you're plugging God into the gap of your knowledge. But in this case, when we talk about the creation of the universe, we're not plugging God into a gap of our knowledge, because nature can't be the cause of nature. In other words, nature had a beginning. That's what the evidence shows. And if nature had a beginning, whatever created nature can't be made of nature. In other words, whatever created nature must transcend nature, something that must go beyond the natural, which is what we know, which is what we call supernatural. In fact, a number of years ago I think it was at Oakland University in Michigan, a former Christian, now an atheist, said, after I gave the evidence for the cosmological argument, he said, oh, Frank, that's a God of the gaps argument. I said, no, it's not a God of the gaps argument. You're never going to find a natural cause for all of nature. He said, oh, no, we will. At one point, science is going to discover a cause for the creation of the universe. And I said, well, first of all, John, that sounds a lot like faith, right? You don't have the cause now, but you think someday the cause is going to arise. That's a faith position. Number two, not only is it a faith position, you might call this a God of the gaps, but really what that is called a natural law of the gaps. When you can't figure out a natural law for it, you just assume it's got to be a natural law. And so you're plugging a natural law in to your equation here, even though you don't know what it is. Again, that is a faith position because, well, it's really a faith position because you can't find a natural cause for all of nature. Natural laws were created at the beginning, which is my third point. And what I said back to him, he said to me, look, if you give science enough time, we'll figure out a natural cause for all of nature. I said, you'll never find a natural cause for all of nature. That would be like me saying, if you gave me enough time, one day I'm going to figure out that I gave birth to my own mother. It's impossible in principle. Why? Because if nature had a beginning, again, whatever created nature can't be made of nature. Whatever created the universe has to transcend the universe, has to transcend nature. And by the way, you don't even get rid of the problem if you posit a multiverse for which there's no evidence. Why? Because even if the multiverse is true, you need somebody to create these other universes, and you can't go on an infinite regress of universes. even a big proponent of the multi-universe theory, a guy by the name of Alexander Vilenkin, who wrote the book Many Worlds in One, even he admitted, he's an agnostic, by the way, even he admitted, he said, even if there are other universes out there, it seems the whole show needs an absolute beginning. Now, he didn't believe it was God. He didn't really have a cause, but he's saying you still need an absolute beginning for all of this. And if you need an absolute beginning for all this, you don't get rid of the need for a creator, whether there's one universe or multiple universes. In fact, if there are multiple universes, it seems like you multiply the need for a creator. Okay, so the fundamental principle of all science is the law of causality. And if every effect has a cause and the universe is an effect, then the universe had a beginning, and the cause, it seems, must have the attributes I just mentioned. Another effect, in addition to the universe having a beginning, is the fact that the universe is fine-tuned. That if you were to change any one of a number of attributes about our universe, virtually imperceptibly, none of us would be here. And this holds true from the very beginning. In fact, Stephen Hawking famously said, he said, if the expansion rate of the universe was different by 1 part in 1,000 million a second after the Big Bang, the universe would have collapsed back on itself or never developed galaxies. Now, what could have caused the universe to expand at an imperceptibly precise, or an unimaginably, better stated, unimaginably precise rate? That if it were a little faster, we wouldn't have a universe, or a little slower, we wouldn't have a universe. What could have caused that? Seems to be the same mind that created space-time and matter out of nothing would be the same mind that caused the expansion rate to be precisely what it needed to be. And by the way, you can't make any sort of evolutionary argument or evolutionary cause for this. You can't say, well, the expansion rate just evolved to this particular speed. Why? Because this is one of the initial conditions of the universe. It didn't evolve at all. It started there. From the very beginning, that was the rate. It's the initial expansion rate. And by the way, the current expansion rate is also fine-tuned by the cosmological constant, which is fine-tuned to 1 in 10 to the 120th power, which is a number so unimaginable, it's way more than the number of atoms there are in the entire universe. So it appears that there's a mind behind this effect known as fine-tuning. It appears to be designed. Fine-tuning, the best explanation for fine-tuning is design. Look, there's only 2 explanations. Either the expansion rate and many other factors about the universe are precisely where they needed to be because they were designed, or they're precisely where they needed to be even though they weren't designed. Now, what makes more sense? You can't say, well, chance caused it. Why? Because chance is not a cause. Chance is a word we use to describe mathematical possibilities. Chance doesn't cause a thing. In fact, when scientists use the word chance, you know what they really mean? We don't know. That's what they mean, because no known combination of natural forces is going to give you the expansion rate. In fact, natural forces were created with the universe. So if people are going to say it's some sort of natural force that did this, well, the natural force itself needs to be explained. In fact, the natural laws that exist right now, and really it's more precise to say the natural forces, there are only 4 known natural forces: gravity, the strong and weak nuclear forces, and electromagnetism, light, which is on the electromagnetic scale, okay? Those are the only 4 known natural forces that exist. Now, they were created, and yet they are precise and consistent, which begs another question. A, why do they exist so precisely? And number 2, why don't they change? You know, all physical things change. You change, I change. You know, I'm getting older, you're getting older. When you get older, you get dresser disease. That's when your chest falls into your drawers. And I'm sorry, that's a bad dad joke. But in any event, the point here is we're all changing, and yet the laws that govern the universe don't change. Why is that? Why are the natural laws what they are? Why don't they change every 10 minutes like we do? Seems to me because there's a mind behind all this. Laws come from lawgivers, and the laws that govern the universe are precise, number 1, and consistent. Why? It appears to be the product of a mind. So you have the effect from the universe coming into existence. You have the effect from the fact that the universe appears to be designed through fine-tuning. You also have the effect known as the genetic code in life, which appears to be designed as well. In fact, the genome is 3.2 billion letters long. All the letters are in the right order, save a mutation here or two. Where did that come from? You know, if you're walking along the beach and you see John loves Mary in the sand, you look down and you go, oh, the waves must have done that. Or crabs must have come out of the water and made that message. No, you'd never say that. Why? Because you know that in all your prior experiences, messages only come from minds. And it's not a God of the gaps argument to say, oh, there must have been an intelligent being that did that. Why? Because when you see John loves Mary in the sand, you don't just lack a natural explanation. You're not just hunting around for natural explanation saying, oh, maybe one of them is going to come along at some point. No. When you see John loves Mary in the sand, you know it's not only the fact that a natural law can't do this, you have positive, empirically verifiable evidence for an intelligent being, because John loves Mary is evidence for an intelligent being. You don't just lack a natural explanation, you have positive evidence for. So the God of the gaps argument doesn't work here. In fact, any evolutionist or any atheist could shut up every intelligent design theorist when it comes to life if they could answer one question. Tell us the natural forces that can create specified complexity, the natural forces that can create a code 3.2 billion letters long or a genome 3.2 billion letters long. Where does that come from? What natural laws or combination thereof can create that? The answer is there are no natural laws that we know of that can do that. But we do know something that can do that. In fact, in all of our prior experience, we know that messages only come from minds. When Napoleon and his team discovered the Rosetta Stone with those 3 languages on it, even though they didn't see anybody carve that stuff into the Rosetta Stone, it wasn't a God of the gaps argument to say must have been an intelligent being that did that. Why? Because those 3 languages are positive evidence for an intelligent being. They didn't just lack a natural explanation. They immediately knew, boom, those are languages. Somebody must have put that there. A mind did that. Well, if the Rosetta Stone requires a mind, so does every cell in your body, which each cell has 3.2 billion letters in it. That requires a mind as well. So we have the effect from the universe. We have the effect from the design of the universe. We have the effect from the genome found in life, and we have the effect known as the moral law. And I'm not going through all the effects, just a few of them here. Every one of us intuitively understands that certain things are right and other things are wrong. That torturing babies for fun is wrong. Well, if it's wrong, there must be a standard beyond us that defines what rightness is, and any deviation from that standard would be what we would call evil. You would have to have some enormous defeater of that to say, no, it's really not wrong to murder innocent babies or to torture innocent babies. What kind of defeater would you have for that? Any argument for atheism would be built on weaker premises than the intuition you already have that torturing babies for fun is wrong. So why wouldn't you go with your stronger intuition that certain things are right and other things are wrong? And if they're really right, there must be a standard of really right outside of ourselves. It's not just our opinion. Now, we've talked a lot on this program about the moral law, so I won't belabor the point here. But everybody intuitively understands certain things are right and other things are wrong. And that is an effect written on our hearts. And by the way, this effect can be distorted by bad education or by bad choices, which sometimes it is. But as soon as you're old enough to know what murder is, and as soon as you're old enough to know what right and wrong is, you know that murder's wrong. You have to be really talked out of it by some bad apples or from some bad education or some bad cultural factors for you to eventually say, murder's just fine. Okay, it's written on your heart. You can suppress that truth, as Paul talks about in Romans 1. Of course, in Romans 2, he says it's written on our hearts. And you don't even need the Bible to know that because it's intuitive to you. In fact, this is how our country began. We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men were created equal and endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. Among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And those rights are endowed by our Creator. If there's no Creator, there are no rights. If everything's just a matter of opinion, it's just your opinion against someone else's opinion, then you can't say you have a right to anything. No matter where you are on, say, the abortion issue, right to life or right to choice or whatever, there's no right to anything if there's no God. On marriage, there's no right to natural marriage or same-sex marriage or any other kind of marriage if there's no God. Why? It's just your opinion. against somebody else's opinion, unless there's a standard beyond us, an objective standard that is good and we're obligated to obey, can we have rights. Otherwise, they're just preferences. There's a lot of people in our culture today talking about their right to this or right to that, and many of them are atheists. So they're stealing from God this concept of rights while claiming he doesn't exist. Okay, so the scientific way to show that God exists is to reason from effect to cause. And I want to show you one last thing before we take your questions. Jorge, bring up that graphic that I originally, there it is right there. This is a graphic from our book, Stealing from God, Why Atheists Need God to Make Their Case. There it is right there. And in that book, we have a chapter on science. And the chapter on science, the title of the chapter on science is Science Doesn't Say Anything, Scientists Do. Now, what you're looking at here is the fact that this is a graphic that my friend J. Warner Wallace drew me for the book. The reason I say science doesn't say anything, scientists do, is because whether you're before a scientific experiment or an historical investigation, you have to frame it, and that takes a mind to do it. While you conduct the scientific experiment or the historical investigation, you have to make certain philosophical commitments or decisions. And after you look at the data from your experiment or historical investigation, you have to interpret it. So science doesn't do any of that. Scientists do that. In fact, there would be no such thing as science unless people existed, because science is just a method we use to discover cause and effect relationships. It's just a method. And it's built, as you can see here, on philosophical presuppositions. All of these philosophical presuppositions are necessary for anyone to do science. Why morality? I'll just say a brief word about each of these and then zero in on one and then get to your questions. Why morality? Because science can't tell you whether it's right to say, build a bomb and blow it up. Science can tell you how to build a bomb, but it can't tell you whether or not you ought to use it. Because science by itself is amoral. You can't put morality in a test tube. The scientist has to bring morality to his or her endeavor in order to be moral in their endeavor. Obviously, as a scientist, if you're Joseph Mengele and you're operating on children in Nazi death camps, you're immoral, but you're still doing science. On the other hand, if you're a doctor who's using your talents to heal children, because you go to the mission field and you use your talents, what is it, Doctors Without Borders that do that or something? They use their talents to try and give medical attention to kids. They're using it for a moral reason. See, it's the scientist that brings morality to the endeavor. Morality, it doesn't come with the scientific method. The scientist has to bring it there. Let's go back to the graphic for a minute. You can also see free will. If you don't have free will, you can't follow the evidence where it leads. So science presupposes you have free will. And ironically, many scientists are atheists who claim we don't have free will. Well, how can you even do science then? Logic. You can't prove the laws of logic by some sort of scientific experiment. You need the laws of logic to do the scientific experiment. They're self-evident. That's another effect from God, by the way. His nature is what we mean by, or his nature is logical. The laws of logic come from his nature. Realism, what's realism? That's the assumption we need to make that our minds can ascertain truths about the real world out there through our senses, and then we can draw valid and true conclusions about the real world out there. And you might be surprised to know that many philosophers today don't even believe in realism, and yet they claim to be scientists. Uniformity. That's the idea that causes in the past are like those in the present. Look, if natural laws can do certain things today, or let me say it another way, if natural laws can do things differently many, say, 2,000 years ago than they can do now, like, for example, suppose 2,000 years ago, natural laws could create a message like John loves Mary, but they can't do it now, then we have no way of getting at the past. We have no way of knowing what particular cause caused a particular effect in the past if the laws of nature didn't work in the past as they work today. That's the principle of uniformity. You can't prove that by science. That's a philosophical presupposition you bring to the scientific endeavor. Reason. Obviously, you need reason. You need to be able to reason to true conclusions. You can't prove that by science. You need that in order to do science. Orderly natural laws. This is why I think science needs God. Because you couldn't do science unless there were orderly natural laws. And where do natural laws come from? They come from a lawgiver. You couldn't discover reliable cause and effect unless there were orderly natural laws. If the laws of nature changed every 10 minutes, first of all, we wouldn't exist. But secondly, if we did, we couldn't make predictable conclusions about what happened in the past, say. We couldn't figure out what happened in the past. We can't figure out what's going to happen now in cause and effect if the laws of nature changed all the time. And it seems like the laws of nature are designed by a lawgiver that designed them and keeps them consistent. And finally, the law of causality. If you can't trust the law of causality, that every effect has a cause, you can't know anything about any effect that has occurred in nature. You'd have to give up science if you're going to deny the law of causality. Now, I know there's a lot of people out there who try and say, well, the quantum vacuum shows us that the law of causality might not apply. Well, first of all, we don't really know what's going on in the quantum vacuum. Number two, when we're trying to discover what's going on in the quantum vacuum and we're getting data, we're using the law of causality to come to a conclusion that say that the law of causality doesn't apply. Well, you're using the law of causality to say it doesn't apply at the quantum level. Thirdly, and this is a corollary with the first point, that we don't really know what's going on with the law of causality in the quantum level. Richard Feynman, who was an atheist quantum physicist, he's since passed on. He said, if somebody tells you really what they know, what's going on the quantum level, they don't really know what they're talking about. We don't really know what's going on at the quantum level. In fact, what it might not be that we can't discover causality at the quantum level, because sometimes at the quantum level, scientists will say, well, it looks like things are popping into existence and out of existence without a cause. That's possible. But the other possibility is that our very action of trying to observe the quantum world may be the cause of its unpredictable observations that we see. In other words, when we slap a photon of light off a quantum particle and the photon weighs more than the quantum particle, it may be that when we try and investigate the quantum world, we're causing these unpredictable observations. It's sort of like sticking your head in a beehive and wondering why the bees are buzzing around. You're causing them to buzz around. So that could be what goes on there. It's not really the law of uncausality, the Heisenberg uncertainty principle you may have heard. It's really the law of unpredictability, that we can't predict the simultaneous speed and location of a subatomic particle. Not that the subatomic particles don't have causes. It's just that we can't predict where they're going to be at any given time when we try and observe them. So if the law of causality applies everywhere else, why wouldn't we assume it applies at the quantum level? The benefit of the doubt should go that it does apply at the quantum level. So even that doesn't get rid of the need for the law of causality. But if you want to get rid of the law of causality, you've got to get rid of all science. And that's a pretty high price to pay if you're trying to get rid of God by saying, well, things can pop into existence out of nothing. By the way, the quantum vacuum's not nothing. It's something. It needed a cause itself. So that doesn't help the matter either. So the bottom line to all this is when people say, what's the easiest way to show God exists? I say that every effect must have a cause, and we know God by his effects. We know God by his effects of creating the universe, of fine-tuning the universe, of creating life in the genetic code, and also from the moral law. And from those four arguments, really, there's the cosmological, then the two middle ones are really teleological design arguments, and the third one is the moral argument. From those arguments there, we can ascertain that we have a spaceless, timeless, immaterial, powerful, moral, personal, intelligent creator who created all things and sustains all things. Now, as I say, you got to look at the New Testament documents and other historical data to discover if Jesus rose from the dead. That's another question. But it seems like it could be the God of the Bible here, just from the arguments, the cosmological, teleological, and moral arguments. So every effect has a cause, and we know God by his effects. All right, Jorge, let's go to some questions. If we got some people Frank, ready.
Absolutely. We have three people ready right now. And actually, we have some super chats here, and I want to read a couple of them while I'm getting this ready. Make this easy for you. Damon Sapp says, what archaeological evidence can you show unbelievers to prove that the Jews were in Egypt for 400 years? And I know maybe Titus Kennedy, we had them on the roster to come on, so maybe we can make that happen. That's part one, and I'll let you answer that. And also, what do you think about the book of...
That.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, because part one, exactly. If you go back about a year, maybe a year and a half, to this very Hope One show, go back and look for the show we did on evidence from Egypt for the Exodus with Titus Kennedy and Stephen Meyer. And that was a long one, Jorge. I want to say that one for like over an hour and a half, because there's so much evidence. This is evidence from Egypt, ladies and gentlemen, that Titus is saying he's an archaeologist. In fact, he went there and discovered or rediscovered the oldest inscription of Yahweh anywhere in the world. It comes from Sudan, which at the time was Egypt during Exodus times. And this inscription, he actually discovered, it comes from, guess what, about 1400 BC, which is exactly when the Israelites were leaving Egypt to go to the promised land. So yeah, there's plenty of evidence that the Egyptians, or that the Jews were in Egypt around that time. What was the second part of that question?
Second part will be, well, what do you think about the book of Enoch?
I'm no expert on the book of Enoch, so I don't have an opinion, but our friend Dr. Michael Heiser does. And if you go to his website, Michael Heiser, in fact, Michael Heiser is going to be on the show next week, Lord willing.
Next week, absolutely.
Yeah, next week. Ask Michael Heiser anything. So just call in next week and come on live on Skype, and he can answer it directly. His short answer is this. He thinks the book of Enoch has some pretty good historical data in it, and it helps you understand what people were thinking at the time, but he does not think the book's inspired. But you can get more details from him on that.
Right. He's got 2 commentaries on the book of Enoch, and we need to know that the book of Enoch is a compilation of things that were attributed to Enoch. So, it depends on what section you're talking about, and he does a great job in his commentary. I have another one here, and this is, I know we usually don't go into this, but this is super chat, so we're going to honor that. And just Jesus, Joe, follower of Christ, asks, he gave us $5 super chat. He says, do you hold to the all or new young earth? He says, I know it's not a salvation issue. He says, I'm just curious. I love your work. God bless.
I'm absolutely certain the universe is at least 59 years old. Okay. All right. I'll throw my mom in there. It's at least 83. All right. You're right. It's not a test for orthodoxy. I think the evidence is better. It's old, but if it's young, I'm happy for that. I don't really care. I just think the evidence is better that it's old. And there are 2 books that God has written, the book of nature and the book we now call the Bible, and both of them go together. And I think, we could spend a lot of time on this here tonight, but the easier thing to do would be go to our YouTube channel, which you're probably watching this on right now, and search for Age of the Earth. We have several short Q&A videos from the college campus on it, where I give a more robust answer. So I'd recommend you just go there and see a little bit further of my position on that. You're right, though. It's not a test for orthodoxy.
All right. Okay, so we got our friend again here. Welcome to the show, man.
Esmar, all the way from Faroe Islands. What's happening?
Nothing. Pretty exciting, but
nothing. All right, take it easy. See ya.
Yeah, see you. I had a short question about how do I do good research? And what I mean is, how do I know I'm trusting some evidence that is, based on the evidence, or the evidence, instead of I'm trusting someone, I'm just trusting them, but I'm not sure if they're trustworthy, or if you kind of know what I mean.
It depends on what the topic is, but that's typically why we have peer review in academia. So other peers will look at someone's writing and give a thumbs up or thumbs down on whether or not it whether it ought to go in an academic journal. The problem, of course, with that is sometimes that's even biased, particularly when it comes to the question of the origin of life and subsequent life forms. They don't allow intelligent design papers into these kinds of journals because they philosophically ruled it out beforehand. So I would think. And by the way, another thing that comes up quite a bit is some of these studies that people cite can't be replicated. And so it's really hard to discover whether or not their findings are true. So it's a very difficult problem, Esmar. I think what you need to do is you need to find people that have a track record of being trustworthy and relying much on them. Look, we're all standing on the shoulders of other people. None of us can know everything there is to know. Right.
Yeah.
I mean, when I'm talking about biology and that kind of thing, that's not from my own expertise. That's from people like Stephen Meyer and Michael Behe. These people have degrees in this kind of material. And so I'm standing on their shoulders. When I'm talking cosmological argument, I'm relying on physicists and other people that know more than I do on it. And so we all have to trust other people. And I know this might sound a little bit odd, but most of what we know by authority, because we can't test it all out ourselves, right? People say, well, the universe is running down. Well, I know I'm running down, but how do I know the universe is running down? Well, scientists say so, and they all agree. Well, okay, that's probably pretty good. You know, the sun, okay, ultimately will burn out one day. And if the universe is running down, it can't be eternal. That's one way we know it's not eternal. But do I know all this from my own intuition? No, not necessarily. No, I have to rely on other people. So you really have to study to see if you can find people you can trust. And there are things that are pretty much what's the right word? They're closed fields. Like thermodynamics is a closed field. Nobody's trying to discover a perpetual motion machine. We gave that up long ago. We said, no, things are running down. You're never going to find a perpetual motion machine. The U.S. Patent Office won't give you a patent for a perpetual motion machine because thermodynamics is a closed field. And it's been closed for decades, okay? Because we've just decided, look, it's over. We've discovered the truth about this. So it's a hard problem, but I think you just got to find other sources. If you're trying to figure out who you can trust, see if other sources say the same thing. Are they reliable too? And I think that's really what you need to do.
All right. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right.
And
thanks, Esmo. Anything else?
See you
there. You go. All right. See you in the course, man. Sounds good. Yeah, we got a new course, Stealing from God. It starts next week. For those of you that want to join it, go to crossexamine.org, click on online courses. We're going to have, I think, 8 Zoom sessions. That's where we're live with one another for Q&A. So check that out at crossexamined.org.
Okay, I got a couple more super chats before we bring our next guest. And this one comes from Angelia. It says, my brother just told me he's an atheist now. He says he only believes in what he can see. Plus, he says too much evil in the world for a God to exist. Not sure how I can help him see the truth.
I would ask him questions. What do you mean by evil? Ask that first, because he's going to have a very difficult time, Angelia, to explain evil without reference to good. But as soon as he references good, then he's back to God, because evil doesn't disprove God. Evil may prove there's a devil out there, but evil doesn't disprove God, because there'd be no such thing as evil unless there was good, and there'd be no such thing as good unless God existed. So evil is actually an argument for God, not an argument against God. And so he may not know that. But Angelia, it might be actually a moral issue, not an intellectual issue. In fact, a question I would ask you is, has your brother, it is your brother, right? Yeah, it says that there. Has your brother begun to do something that God would consider immoral, or God considers immoral recently? Because typically that's what happens. In other words, people don't leave Christianity for intellectual reasons. I mean, some do, but more often than not, it's a moral reason. They don't like some of the moral constraints that God has put on us. And so what they decide to do is they try and cover that with supposed intellectual objections. And so you want to ask them, or you want to discover if it is an intellectual objection or more a moral objection. And the way to do that is to ask this question: if Christianity were true, would you become a Christian? And see if your brother hesitates or says no. Because if he hesitates or says no, it's not a head problem, it's a heart problem. He doesn't want it to be true. He wants to do his own thing. He doesn't want there to be a God. Why? Because he wants to be God over his own life. He's not on a truth quest, he's on a happiness quest. And he's just going to believe whatever he thinks is going to make him happy. And so that might be why he suddenly decided Christianity isn't true. It's because he doesn't think he'll be happy if he tries to live inside the box God has put us in for our own good.
That's great. And we got our friend here again coming, Landon. What's happening, man?
Landon, how are you?
Hey, guys. Doing very well. Thank you, Dr. Turek, so much for your ministry. Sure do appreciate you.
Oh, thank you. Where are you calling again from, Landon?
Tuscaloosa, Alabama.
Tuscaloosa, Roll Tide. Okay, got it. What's happening?
Same, man. Dr. Turk, you use the Titanic in a lot of your different illustrations. And so I was thinking about something the other day. In our role as Christians first, apologists, kind of second, when you kind of picture the Titanic as it's sinking, are we the musicians that are kind of comforting as this ship is going down, it being life or Earth? Are we the officers who are pointing to the fact that there's lifeboats? Hey, there's a way to be saved. And so if we can say, okay, we're the officers pointing to how to be saved, how do we kind of blend the two with the urgency to say, hey, here's the lifeboat, here's how you can be saved, while at the same time being comforting and encouraging while the world is going down?
Yeah, that's a great question, Landon. What would you think about that? What would you say is a way to be both urgent and encouraging at the same time, if in fact you think you need both? What would you say?
Well, the main point of what the Great Commission says is to allow people to know all over the world what the gospel is, that there's hope and there's a God that loves them, that cares about them, that has paid for the sin in their lives. But we all know that there are times whenever we're explaining that and explaining the gospel that if it's done in an egregious way, and even 1 Peter 3:15 mentions to do so kind and compassionately. So I think it needs to be married. And I guess I was just kind of seeing, with the amount of people you interact with, have you found a way to nail that yet, or are you still kind of learning?
Oh, well, I think everybody's a little bit different. There might not be one approach for everyone. And look, some people come to faith by fire and brimstone. Other people come to faith through friendship evangelism. Other people come to faith through apologetics. Other people come to faith because there was a tragedy in their life, and suddenly when they're on their back, they're finally looking up, right? There's a myriad of ways people come to faith. And so I don't know if there's one way that you can say, well, here's the silver bullet that's going to bring people to faith. I don't think it really works that way. I mean, it may work that way for some people, but not for everyone. And I like what my friend Greg Kokel says. A lot of times he says, I'm just gardening. I'm just trying to get seeds planted and see them sprout. I may not see the harvest. Maybe somebody like Landon will see the harvest because I planted some seeds and they started to sprout, and then Landon had the opportunity to bring them all the way to Christ, or somebody else did, right? To use a baseball analogy, the idea is just get on base. You don't have to hit a home run. Just get the guy to first. Somebody else will move him to second, third, and finally home, right? And so I think we have to use every particular method that we can and try and discover where people are. That's why I like the question, if Christianity were true, would you become a Christian? Or even the question, oh, you're not a Christian, why not? Right? And try and discover where people are coming from. And it's not a simple process of here's a fact. Oh, I believe it. Great. That doesn't happen very often. It's a process. And I think one of the biggest problems we have is that people are just apathetic. They just don't care. How do you make people who don't care? If I had the answer to that, first of all, everybody would be a Christian. And secondly, I'd be a billionaire to get people to care, right?
You're saying the atheist would be the one that's apathetic, not the Christian in that aspect, right?
Well, the unbeliever, whoever the unbeliever is. I think apatheism is a bigger problem than atheism, right? I mean, there are people we know who they're not atheists, but they're like, they don't really care whether God exists or not, right? Oh, he has a God. Okay, great. But even the demons believe that God exists, right? And they tremble. They don't trust in him. So that's really the issue. It's not, you see, what we forget a lot of times is we think God just wants us to acknowledge he exists. No, that doesn't help us just to acknowledge he exists. I mean, it's necessary, but it's not sufficient. You have to go from belief that to belief in. He wants to have a relationship with us. He wants to interact. He wants us to trust in him, not just believe that he exists. I mean, the demons believe that he exists. So it's not just about belief that, it's trust in, right? God isn't any more interested in us believing that he exists than a girlfriend is interested in knowing that you think she'd make a good wife. She wants you to ask her, right? To trust in her. That's what she wants. Oh, you'd make a great wife, and then you never ask her. She's like, oh, what good is that? Right?
That's right.
So I think it's different for all sorts of different people. And we're doing a little course called Why Can't You Be Normal Just Like Me here next month too. It's about personality differences. And there are personalities that are really swayed by stories and emotion. And then there are other personalities that are very analytical and logical, and they want all the facts lined up. And so you're going to have to approach those people differently.
Yeah. Wonderful. Hey, thank you, Jorge, and thank you, Dr. Turk. Sure do appreciate you guys.
All right. Thanks, Landon. Thanks for being on. Appreciate it.
All right.
Frank.
We are have a couple more and a couple super chats here, man. They're coming and they have great questions. I have Aaron Lovato here. He's asked, if God knows all things and created all things, how can he had repented of the actions of his creation, which is us? And then he cites Genesis 6:7, 1 Samuel 15:11, and Joel 2:13. I know we've done this several times here, so I'm just going to give it back to you and then bring our next guest after.
Okay, so you say it was Genesis 6?
Genesis 6, verse 7.
All right, stand by. You know, just to reiterate, people, there are no verses in the Bible.
Right.
There are no verses in the Bible. The chapter and verse divisions were added 500 years ago to help us navigate the text. The problem is we tend to think if it's got a number in front of it, we can yank it out and make it say whatever we want. We got to see the overall context. So Genesis 6, this is the famous passage about the Nephilim. It says, when human beings began to increase in number on the earth and daughters were born to them, the sons of God saw that the daughters of humans were beautiful, and they married any of them, or they married any of them they chose. Then the Lord said, my spirit will not contend with humans forever, for they are mortal. Their days will be 120 years. The Nephilim were on the earth. Now, if you want to know who the Nephilim were, tune in here next week, Thursday, same bat time, same bat channel, for Dr. Michael Heiser, because he has a very strong view on this passage. We'll talk about it next week if you want. You can ask a question. Anyway, when the sons of God went to the daughters of humans and had children by them, they were heroes of old, men of renown. The Lord saw how great the wickedness of the human race had become on the earth, and that every inclination of thoughts of the human heart was only evil all the time. The Lord regretted that he had made human beings on the earth, and his heart was deeply troubled. Okay, question is, can you regret something you know that's going to happen? Yeah, of course you can, right? Gee, I mean, when you have a child, you know, at some point that child's going to disobey you, maybe break your heart. Are you going to regret that? Yeah, well, of course you will. But that doesn't mean that it somehow creates a contradiction that because you knew it was going to happen, that contradicts the fact that you regret it later. No, God can regret things. He can grieve things, even though he knew they were going to happen. God knew that you would sin, that I would sin. That's grievous to him. But because he knows it doesn't change the fact that it's grievous to him. Just knowing it doesn't change that. So it doesn't say that God wished he had never created human beings. Okay. If it did, it would be hyperbole to say that this is how strongly God reacts to this particular sin. It's simply saying that he regrets the fact that they're evil all the time, that he made human beings on the earth, and and his heart was deeply troubled. First of all, partially, this is an anthropomorphism. What's an anthropomorphism? That's attributing human emotions to God. God has emotions, but they're not really affected by human beings. God is always pleased with faith, and he's always displeased with sin. But he doesn't change, we change. When we have faith, we're under God's grace, or we're under God's love. When we sin, then we're under God's wrath. Now, he can have grace for us because we're sinners, but it's not God that's changing, we're changing. So some of this language is written from an observational perspective. It's anthropomorphic language, applying it to a God that doesn't change, but it helps us understand the gravity of our sin. So there's no contradiction here that God could regret something even though he knew it would happen. Just like you can regret something even though you know something's going to happen. All right?
Excellent, Frank. And we have our next guest coming in. Joel, welcome to the show, man.
Joel, how are you?
Appreciate you. Pretty good, Frank. I just discovered you about 3 weeks ago, and it's been amazing. It's been very informative. I'm a Christian myself.
Great.
But I want to play a little bit of a devil's advocate.
Sure, but where are you first, Joel? We got to know where everyone's from.
I'm from Palm Bay, Florida.
Palm Bay, where is that?
That's by the Space Coast. That's about 45 minutes south from Daytona.
Daytona. All right, I'll be on the other side of the state on Sunday. I'll be at Bayside Church in Sarasota, and then I'll be at Grace Community Church for Skeptics Night next Wednesday night, and then back here for this show on Thursday, Lord willing. So if you come across the state, I'll see you this weekend. But anyway, go ahead. What's going on?
All right. So with morality, how would you define it? Just the definition of morality.
Well, morality is lining our behavior up with God's nature and God's commands.
Okay.
That's just a kind of an off-the-cuff definition. Aligning ourselves with God on issues of of right and wrong on issues of our behavior.
Okay. The definition for it, yeah, you're right. It's knowing what's right or wrong or good or bad behavior. Mm-hmm. So my question would be, could immorality be explained by heritable characteristic like animal behavior? For example, like there's squirrels that see other squirrels digging and hiding their nuts, right? And once they leave, they go and dig it out. When the other squirrels catch them, they get into a fight because they know that he did something wrong and the other one's chasing him because of that. Or like relationship with animals. Some, just stick with one partner. Others, like lions, have 7. So couldn't like morality just be an evolutionary process pretty much?
Okay, well, the question is, could our thoughts about morality come from evolution rather than God? That's really the question, if I'm understanding you rightly.
Correct.
Sure, it's possible that our thoughts come from evolution, but if that's the case, all of our thoughts came from evolution, including the thought that our morality came from evolution. So why should we trust it? Right? That's one problem with that view. Secondly, morality is not biological. Morality is an immaterial virtue. It's not something you find in your genes. Like I said before, you can't put morality in a test tube. It's an immaterial value or virtue. It's not something that is biological. So it's what we would call in logic a category mistake. We're talking about a immaterial virtue in the category of biology. Those two things are not in the same category. So I would say that couldn't be the case. Thirdly, if you want to say that evolution has given us our morals, our thoughts about morality, then that means that our morals change. And that would mean that at one point we might think that murder is a good thing or that rape is a good thing. In fact, if evolution's true and our goal is survival of the fittest, then why shouldn't we rape in order to have our genes survive? You would have no way of saying rape was wrong if you're trying to say that evolution is our guide for morality. Now, to be fair here, most atheists will not take evolution as their guide. In fact, Richard Dawkins has famously said, even though I'm a Darwinist, I do not want to abide by Darwinian morality. Well, that's to his credit. He doesn't want to abide by Darwinian morality, survival of the fittest, like a squirrel stealing somebody else's nuts. That's just survival of the fittest. The squirrel isn't doing a moral or immoral thing because the squirrel's not a moral being, right? It's not making moral choices. It's just instinctively trying to survive. But back to Richard Dawkins, he's saying, I don't believe in a Darwinian morality. You know what the Darwinian morality ultimately gave us? Well, to be fair again, there is no such thing as our Darwinian morality, but people can derive morality from survival of the fittest. That's what Hitler did, right? He said if the weaker races do not want to fight, they have no right to survive. And what he was trying to do is create the super race, the Aryan race, and he was going to kill all the other undesirables in his view, the gypsies, the Jews, the homosexuals, and the Jehovah's Witnesses. He was going to kill all of them. So because they were taking resources from the Uber race, and so he wanted the Uber race to flourish. So in his mind, he was trying to do a good thing. You see, tyrants are always trying to do good things, but using evil means to get there. But you couldn't say Hitler was wrong for doing that if evolution was our guide, because he was just following natural selection in that regard, right? So it doesn't work as a standard for morality. Evolution doesn't work. And I spent a lot of time in the book Stealing from God talking about it. So those are the reasons I would say, no, it's not a good way of trying to establish a morality or explain where morality comes from.
Fair enough. Appreciate your time. Thank you.
All right. Well, thanks so much. Call in again.
Yeah, we'll do.
Right. All right. Thanks. All right. Thank you so much. All right. Let me pull off another.
Actually, I got another one. I got tons of super chats here. I got my man Bam Bamster. He always supports us. He says, Senor Francisco Turek, listening to you now, and I recently received Stealing from God in the mail. Looking forward to reading it. God bless you, hermanos. So that is just a comment, not a question. And I'm going to start calling you Francisco Turek. I like that
Francisco!
one, man. You've been rebaptized, Francisco Turek.
I'm going to call you Ernesto.
Well, you always call me that anyways.
I also call this guy the Zorro of
the Zorro. Fernie Gutierrez asks, is all sin equal in severity and penalty? I believe it is not equal biblically speaking. However, what is the best biblical defense for this?
Yes, we actually have a number of presentations on this, but let me give you the short answer. And the short answer is no, all sins are not equal. All sins separate you from God, but all sins are not equal. In fact, Jesus talked about a greater commandment. What does that imply? There are lesser commandments. He talked about greater love. What does that imply? There's lesser love. He talked about greater judgment. What does that imply? There's lesser judgments. In fact, in Luke 12, he talks about two kinds of people who he's going to find when he comes back. The kind of person who knew what the right thing was and didn't do it, and the kind of person that didn't know what the right thing was and didn't do it. And he said the person that knew the right thing is going to be beaten with more blows. There's going to be more punishment. And this makes sense, right? It makes sense not only from the Bible, if you read the Bible, but it also makes sense from our own jurisprudence, right? If somebody murders somebody, we're going to put them away for a long time, hopefully. If you jaywalk, you're not going to go to jail, right? You're going to get a fine, unless you're a Christian in California, then maybe you might. Anyway, no, obviously, there are different penalties for different crimes because there's different severity of crimes. Even in our culture, even certain murders will carry a bigger sort of punishment. For example, if you murder a police officer, that carries a greater punishment in some places than if you murder just a normal citizen. Now, both are terrible. Both are going to get a big punishment, but there's even a greater crime for somebody who's out there putting his or her life on the line to protect others. If you take that person's life, you might even get more of a punishment, or you might get life without parole, or maybe even the death penalty. So we do that in our own jurisprudence system. It's very consistent with what the Bible says as well.
Excellent, man. Now we have our next guest, Levi. What's happening, man? Good to see you.
Hey,
again.
Levi. Levi's been on the show before. Levi, how are you?
Hey, I'm good. How are y'all?
Good. Tell us where you are from again. You're Mississippi?
Yes, sir. Mississippi.
That's right. What's going on?
Not much. I was just wondering, as an apologetics nerd, how can I get people to see the need for apologetics, in the sense that every Christian needs to know how to give an answer to people who ask questions if they're curious. But I feel like the church kind of ducked many times, hoping I get asked a question, and when questions are raised in the church, many times it seems like it gets ignored or like looked on with like disappointment. And many times I've even told.
I agree. Yeah, we were going to say, are there many times you even told what?
I've told people that I want to do apologetics full time after I get my master's, my doctorate, and they've looked at me like it wasn't like realistic, or they didn't take me serious or anything like that.
Okay, well, sometimes things only become important when they become personal. And what happens is people might not see the need for it until it hits their own family. The problem is sometimes when it hits their own family, it's too late. Like when their kid goes off to college, or even before college, they check out of Christianity because they kept asking questions and nobody would give them a good answer. And they also saw a bunch of stuff on the internet they didn't know how to answer. And, oh, by the way, it would be nice if God didn't exist anyway. That way I could sleep with my girlfriend. And they check out. Okay. And then the parent goes, oh, no, what can I do? My son says he's an atheist now. Oh, are there any books that can help? Yeah, too late. Probably. Okay. You might want to prevent it from happening rather than trying to go on a search and rescue mission. And this is one of the reasons why the Bible continually talks about always be ready to give an answer for the hope that you have. I'm set in defense of the gospel. Come, let us reason together. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, strength, and mind. Let's demolish arguments and take every thought captive to Christ. I mean, on and on and on. It's all about getting the evidence that it's true so you can be confident that you can trust in Christ and you can share that with others. So how do you get people to really get excited about it? Again, if I had the answer to that, everybody would be a Christian and everybody would be an apologist. But all you can do is do what you can do. You can pray. You can point out the scriptures. It's not an option. You can be as enthusiastic as you want about it. And and try and be as graceful as you can about it too, because your goal isn't to win arguments. Your goal is to win people with good arguments. But unfortunately, apologetics has the reputation of people who just want to argue all the time. And who wants to be around somebody at all just wants to argue all the time? You know, we want to use arguments to point people to Christ, not to beat them over the head so they feel defeated. You know?
Yeah.
So I think it's kind of much in our approach. How do we approach people in a way that intrigues them and is graceful enough that they want to hear more? And the book Tactics can help you do that. So get the book Tactics if you don't have it, Levi.
While you're at it.
All right. Very good.
Well,
all right, man.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Thanks for being on. Call in again. Good to see you.
You too.
All right. All right,
what else Frank,
you got, man?
You're going to have to pick a question now. I ran out of super chats, man. You answered them all. So just pick a question from the audience, and then I'll bring our next guest, Victor, on the screen.
All right. Okay. Why does the absence of the last 12 verses in Mark not pose a problem to the other three Gospels since Mark was written first? Well, first of all, for those of you that don't know, it's questionable whether Mark 16:9 to 20 was in the original, because the earliest manuscripts don't have it. Mark may have ended his gospel with a cliffhanger. Christ is risen. Go tell the apostles. If that section of scripture isn't really original, it doesn't change much about what we know from other areas of scripture. Okay. The only thing it talks about is snake handling, and that's why I don't do it. Okay. But it really isn't talked about much elsewhere. And Mark, they think, was written first, but that doesn't mean if Mark is written first, that the other gospels are just copying from Mark. Mark may be used as a source by Matthew and Luke if Mark is indeed first, and most scholars do think Mark was first. But obviously, Matthew and Luke have other material, and they have other sources as well. In fact, Matthew probably was an eyewitness himself. Luke was not, although he knew eyewitnesses quite obviously. Luke is a very meticulous historian, and he's been proven right so many different times. In fact, our book, I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist, has that a lot. In fact, Luke was so good, he gets a round of applause, okay? So if you really delve into Luke, you're going to see that this guy was an historian of first rank, as William Ramsey put it, a great archaeologist. So it doesn't, in my view, create a problem at all, because Matthew, Luke, and John either are eyewitnesses or have access to eyewitness testimony themselves. So regardless of whether the end of Mark should have been in there or not, it doesn't affect the other Gospels.
Excellent, Frank. We got our new guest, Victor, but Victor needs to go ahead and turn his camera on. He had it on just a minute ago, so he has to just click.
Hit the button, Victor.
There you go.
It's magic.
There you go, Victor.
He's
got it. And you got to turn your audio on, and then I'll bring you in. Turn your audio on just like you did your camera.
All right. Once again, if you hit the button, you'll be on.
There you go. Now you're on, bro.
All right. Yeah, we can hear you, Victor. Go ahead. How are you? Where are you, by the way?
Actually, my name is Vitor without C, because I'm from Brazil. I'm in Brazil.
All right. All the way from Brazil.
Obrigado.
Victor, how are you?
I'm good. I'm actually very excited. I can't believe I'm here.
Yeah, you're here, man. You can do this. Skype's amazing, isn't it?
My name, by the way, teach the pronunciation. V is like V-E-E-T-O-H. Vito. V-E-E-T-O-H. Vito. Imagine like this. V-E-T-O-H.
Vito.
Yeah.
Did I get that right?
But I wouldn't get many names. Yeah, pretty close.
I'm from New Jersey. I don't even pronounce most English words right. So there you go. But go ahead. What do you want to talk about?
A lot of things. I'm going to mispronounce a lot of things, so whatever.
No, that doesn't matter. Go ahead.
So I have this friend who is an agnostic, and he has an evangelical girlfriend. I met him in the very last week of 2019, and I let him borrow the Case for Christ when I met him. He read the book, like, okay, oh, good, nice, that's interesting. I really liked it. And I thought he was going to be very easy, you know. Soon he's going to call me. What do I have to do? Oh, you need to surrender your life to Jesus, body and soul, completely. I don't really like much of the sinner's prayer. I'm kind of like a Paul Washer on this issue. I don't hate it as much as he does, but the thing is, he's seeing many of the signs of the times we're going through. I personally think that I'm going to live to see the reign of the Antichrist or the Rapture. Doesn't matter what comes first. I think it's happening way too fast. We're walking towards the government of the Antichrist, and he does see that. He does see that, and the reason he's seeing we're us walking through to a global government, just like the Bible is. He made the association, not me to him. He association. Oh, this is biblical, right? We're from according to the Bible. And I'm like, dude, what are you waiting for? And I think I know what. I think he knows. He doesn't grasp the idea of hell. I don't want to take too long because I know people are waiting for me. But I think I kind of need to explain the psychology behind him. And I think I know what's keeping him from it, from surrendering. He says he's a very undecided person in general, so no wonder he's an agnostic.
Okay, is he decided about being an agnostic?
Nice.
He's sure about being an agnostic? He's absolutely certain agnosticism's true.
No. He's like, I don't know if God's real or not. It's not like,
okay.
He's not the I can't know type. But it's something that's pretty similar. He thinks we can't know if the Bible is metaphoric or not, what's metaphorical or not. And he was actually very surprised to find out that we actually believe the Noah's Ark story literally. And he is a very undecided person in general, very. And the thing about the psychology of the undecided people is that they feel safe on the fence. I don't know if you have the story of the guy who's on the fence and God's calling him on one side. You know?
Yeah. So he's on the fence. So what do you want to do? You want to see how you can knock him over to the Christian side. Well, have you ever asked him the question, if it were true, would you become a Christian? And what does he say?
He said yes, but I think he thinks the answer is yes. The thing is, he is willing, quote unquote, because as an undecided person, to him, the fence feels very safe, especially when he sees the Antichrist reign coming up, which is going to persecute Christians in a way far worse than it was Hitler against the Jews. He can grasp that, which increases his fear of becoming a Christian.
Well, first of all, as you know, Christians are going to disagree over that. They're going to say, some will say, well, the dispensational view is that Christians are going to be taken out before the Great Tribulation. You know, others will say we'll go through it. So trying to figure out where you should be as a result of reading the Bible in terms of, am I going to be persecuted or not? That's not a motivation, or that's not a good reason to say, well, the reason that I want to be a Christian is because I just don't want to get persecuted, or I don't want to be a Christian because I don't want to get persecuted. The real reason he ought to want to be a Christian is because it's true. That's why, regardless of the implications.
But he knows that if it's true, this is going to cost him on today's world. It's going to cost him.
No matter who. Look, there's going to be cost no matter which way you go. Maybe more cost if you become a Christian temporally, but the retirement plan is out of this world. So you know, I think, and you get Jesus. You're really instead of trying to figure out, you know, how can I maneuver my way so I'm going to live the most comfortable life here? Maybe you should think about eternity and say, look, I just want Jesus. And if I have to go through hell here to get there, this is the only hell I'm ever going to experience. As Tony Evans has said, if you're a believer, this is the only kind of hell you're ever going to experience. If you're an unbeliever, this is the only kind of heaven you're ever going to experience.
So the two things that are going to summarize my question, and then I think we can end because I don't want to take too much time.
Sure, go ahead.
The things is, he, as an undecided person, he is afraid of jumping to a side. because he's very undecided.
He's already on a side. No matter what, even if you're undecided, you're on a side. Okay.
Yeah,
So he doesn't realize that. He's not. And Jesus said, "Look, if you're not with me, you're against me." So he's already on the other side. It's not like he's in neutral ground. He's not Switzerland. Okay. He's either with Jesus or he's not. There's no you can't be like neutral. Jesus, I'm just going to wait till you show up and then I'll just no. That's not the way it works.
Let me interrupt. This is important. The thing is, I told him that, and he's so afraid of jumping to a side. Eventually, he said something to me that I was like, part of me said, "Okay, I give up. This guy is impossible." I know that's not the case, but my inner reaction was like, "Oh, screw you! You know what? Forget it. I'm out. Go to hell already. Don't say I didn't warn you. You know." He said to me, he said to me that his father-in-law, the father of his girlfriend, Angelico, is kind of being annoying on him, trying to convert him. And I told him, look, give us some slack, because we're, on our belief, we're literally trying to save you from the worst fate there is. We don't want to be annoying. We don't want to be you know, those very annoying types that go like, but you have to cut us some slack, because we're trying to. Well,
you love the guy, right? If a plane was going down and you had a parachute and you're annoying the guy to say, "Hey, here's your parachute. Here's your parachute." I don't care how annoying you have to be. You got to get him that parachute, right? And if he's going to be mad at you for that, well, you know, what can you do? You're just trying to save the guy's life.
Yeah, and you know what he replied? That his reply was like to me, you know.
All right. Well, look, maybe he's not ready to hear it. So what you might want to do is just lay off it for a while and plant seeds here or there. And what might happen at some point is some tragedy is going to occur, because it occurs to all of us. And that's when he may call you, right? When the student's ready, the teacher will appear, but he's not ready right now.
Let me just the answer he gave, because that's important. But if God really is real, I'll see him when I die, and then I'll change.
No, that's not the way it works. God gives you the opportunity now. Okay.
You're not go to hell if you die without Jesus, and it's over. It's forever. And he was like, "Oh, but I don't know. Maybe the eternal hell is a metaphorical part, and you don't know if the Bible, what part of the Bible is metaphorical or not." I was like,
Hey, what you need to tell him is that every metaphor in some way refers to something literal.
Yeah.
Okay. In some way it does. So like you might even say, well, in hell, they talk about fire and darkness. Well, they two can't seem to go together. They're metaphors, but they're metaphors that are referring to something real, which is just as terrible. Okay.
Feelings, hatred. Do you think I should use the end times, the apparent end times events as an apologetics?
Well, end times are questionable in terms of when this is actually going to happen. As you know, Jesus said, "I'm going to come like a thief in the night." I think you ought to just talk about the fact that it's true, and that Jesus has died for you, and that by trusting in him, you're not only forgiven, you're given his righteousness, and out of gratitude for what he's done for you, you ought to love him back. If you don't want to do that, God is not going to force you into heaven against your will. You don't want him now, you're not going to want him in eternity. But thanks for the call. I got to move on.
English? Just say yes.
Your English was great. My English was not as good as yours. But thank you.
I'm going to tell my family that's going to be forever.
All right. Thank you so much, Vitor. We appreciate it. All right.
Frank, okay, we're out. We have one more super chat, and then we can wrap it up for today.
Super chat. What do we got?
Okay, what do you think about this position that God has different wills? You know, it has his permissive will. It has, I don't know them all. I know I've read it before. I'm not really clear on that. It has a direct will, a permissive will. Do you have an opinion on that? That's the only chat that we missed.
Yeah, I think that God, obviously, he has a perfect will, which would be that nobody would sin, and that is not accomplished. He has a permissive will, which he allows us to sin, right? And yet he can redeem our sinful choices. That's what Christ does for us. And in order for us to have free will, or I should say, in order for us to be able to love and to make choices, we have to have free will. And so that's where his permissive will comes in. He has to permit things that he doesn't really want to happen, but he can still bring good from, even though they do happen. Because in a world of freedom, that those things are going to happen. Just like when you have your own children, you've got to give them the freedom to make choices. And that's the only way they're going to grow. That's the only way they're going to be moral beings, is to have that freedom to do so. So yes, God does have different wills, and those wills are, you might cite them as the answer to different questions. What does God want me to do? He wants you to do his moral will or his perfect will. Will God allow me to sin? Of course he allows you to sin. There are consequences. You can be redeemed from the sin, but there are still consequences. So, there's like 5 or 6 different places in the New Testament, Jorge, where it says this is the will of God for you. Several of those, if I'm not mistaken, have to do with sexual immorality. It's the will of God that you flee from sexual immorality. Why? Because sexual immorality can lead you astray from your primary goal. What's your primary goal in life? Is to know God and to make him known. And look, this is just what the scripture says. I know a lot of people don't like it, but when you get involved in sexual immorality, that can pull you away from God. And he doesn't want that to happen.
All right, Frank, it's been fun today, man. We had no technical difficulties. It's been
not yet. There's still time.
Well, it's a lovely, lovely evening here. Tell our audience what we have for next week, where you're going to be. Where we're going to be in the next couple of weeks. And you started to go back to college campuses. That's exciting.
Yeah, in the spring, the fall, I should say, we're going to be going back to college campuses. This week, Lord willing, I'll be down at Bayside Church on, Sunday morning, Sunday night, Monday night for a big youth conference. And then Wednesday night at Grace Community Church in Sarasota for Skeptics Night. And then the week after that, as you know, Jorge, you'll be with me. We'll be in a CIA down there in Calvary Chapel, Chino Hills. That's all filled up. Nobody can go to that anymore. Week after that, I'll be out at Compass Church in Southern California. The week after that, I'll be at the church in Gilroy, South Valley Community Church in Gilroy, California. So I'll be going to California a lot in August, Lord willing. And a lot of other stuff's on our website. You got some stuff coming up too, don't you?
Well, other than my show in the mornings.
Oh, that's right. You got your show in the morning. Well, you just were speaking at a church there.
Yeah, we actually went to a Christian camp.
That's right.
And I did a church here. I do want to tell everybody that now the ones that are asking questions, make sure you get here early. We usually post this stream where you can get a notification when we go live. If you download our app, you get a notification. A lot of people get here late. They want their questions answered, and then we already dealt with 4, 5, 6 people live. Make sure that you fill out your questions early so we can get you in. The process seemed to be pretty easy, but on my end it's quite complex. So I want to make sure that everybody who want to make sure that we choose their questions for the show, they get here early enough.
Yes, and be early next week because we got Michael Heiser.
Exactly. You can talk to Mike. If you just set a reminder on Facebook, Facebook will send you a reminder, or hopefully will send you a reminder. If you follow us on Instagram, you can always click the 3 buttons and say, hey, remind me of all the notifications for this page. Do the same thing with the bell on YouTube, and that way every time we go live, you will be notified. You will get here early and your questions will be answered. We have a ton of questions that we cannot get to it right away, but we're here to try and help you get those answers. But you need to help us by being here early. That's what I tell my audiences every morning. The earlier you get, and I tell people, hey, I know it's not a biblical verse, but if you get here early, I'll try to get to your questions. So just take that as canon for the show. And we're doing the same thing here. We love to interact with you guys, but you guys have to be here early. And with that being said,
Yep. I was going to say also that this topic that we did at the top of the show, the scientific way to show that God exists, we're going to cover on the podcast this week. I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist podcast in more depth. So check that out as well.
And make sure that you guys go to Apple Podcasts. You get the podcast, listen to it. That'll help us. We're staying within the top 100. We want to get to the top 10. All right. And all you have to do is go to Apple Podcasts, subscribe to the podcast, listen to it, and then leave us a review. And that will help us out to stay within the top Christian podcast or religious podcast on Apple. All right, Frank. And with that being said, give us your 2 cents on what brings us hope, and then we're out of here, man.
What brings us hope is that God exists and Jesus rose from the dead. Those are the 2 facts you need to know that Christianity is true. And we talked a lot today about why God does exist. Every effect has a cause. The universe is an effect. The fine-tuning of the universe is an effect. The genetic code is an effect. The moral law is an effect. All pointing back to God. And if Jesus rose from the dead, and the evidence shows he did, then the God of the beginning and the God of the design and the God of the morality is also the God that came to earth because we were immoral, and he took our just punishment on himself so that we could be reconciled to him. So trust in Christ. That's our ultimate hope. All right. Thanks.
Amen.
See you guys next week. Dr. Michael Heiser, Unseen Realm. See you then.